There is a specific kind of mourning that happens quietly, without ceremony, sometime after a metabolic diagnosis. It is not the mourning of a big thing. It is the mourning of a Sunday dinner. The particular smell of a kitchen on a slow afternoon. The texture of something that meant comfort and normalcy and belonging before it got reclassified as a biological liability. For most seniors, the potato is the first thing crossed off the list. Not gradually, not with nuance, just gone. Replaced by cauliflower approximations and steamed substitutes that technically fill the plate, but do not fill the thing the plate was supposed to fill. And the cruelest part is that you accepted it. You did the work of deprivation. You walked past the produce aisle with the discipline of someone who takes their health seriously. You made the trade. And then you checked your numbers after the cauliflower rice and the steamed broccoli and realized the trade had not paid what you were promised it would pay. Here is what the conversation that took the potato away almost never included. The potato in a specific state, freshly cooked, hot, eaten immediately, behaves one way in your body. The same potato prepared with one additional step that takes about 5 minutes of effort and 12 hours of patience behaves in a fundamentally different way, not marginally different, mechanistically different. At the molecular level, you are eating a different substance, and the difference determines whether what you are eating becomes a glucose spike or becomes fuel for the gut bacteria that regulate your metabolic function. Most seniors have never been told this. Not because the research is new or obscure, because it is easier to hand someone a forbidden foods list than it is to teach them the chemistry of their own kitchen. The chemistry is not complicated, and once you understand it, the potato comes back to the table. Here is what is actually happening when a hot potato raises your blood sugar, and why the same potato prepared differently tells a completely different biological story. Potato starch in its freshly cooked state exists in what scientists call a gelatinized form. The heat of cooking causes the starch granules to absorb water and swell open. In this open state, your digestive enzymes, specifically amylase, can access the starch molecules almost immediately. Digestion is rapid. Glucose enters your bloodstream quickly. The spike is real and it is steep. But starch is not a fixed structure. It responds to temperature. When cooked potatoes are cooled, fully cooled, to refrigerator temperature, something called retrogradation occurs. The starch molecules that heat loosened begin to realign. They recrystallize into a tighter, more ordered structure. This restructured form has a name. It is called resistant starch. And resistant starch behaves almost nothing like regular starch inside your digestive system. Resistant starch resists enzymatic digestion in the small intestine. Rather than being broken down rapidly into glucose and absorbed into your bloodstream, it passes largely intact into the large intestine, where it is fermented by beneficial gut bacteria. The glucose release is dramatically slower. The spike is flatter. The crash is smaller. This is not a theory. Research published in peer-reviewed nutrition journals has consistently shown that cooling cooked potatoes significantly increases their resistant starch content and reduces their glycemic impact compared to eating them freshly cooked and hot. The villain here is not the potato. The villain is a health culture that treats every gram of carbohydrate as identical regardless of its physical state, that hands you a list of forbidden foods without explaining that the chemistry of preparation changes what those foods actually are by the time they reach your digestive system. Nutritional reductionism took something from you that did not need to be taken. It just needed to be understood differently. If you have spent years avoiding potatoes entirely and still watching your numbers behave in ways that make no sense, hit the like button. Because the food was never fully the enemy. The preparation was the missing variable, and you deserve to know that distinction before the Sunday dinners stopped. Now here is where this becomes practical, because the research on resistant starch is only useful if you understand exactly how to produce it, and most casual discussions of this topic get imprecise in ways that cost you the result. There are 3 rules. All 3 are non-negotiable. Rule 1. The 12-hour minimum. The retrogradation process is not instant. A quick 30 minutes in the refrigerator will not complete it. The starch molecules need time to fully realign and recrystallize, and they need to do it at a sustained cold temperature. The potatoes must reach a core temperature of around 40 degrees Fahrenheit and remain there for a minimum of 12 hours. Then overnight is the gold standard. This is not an approximation. It is the threshold below which the resistant starch conversion is incomplete, and the glycemic benefit is significantly reduced. Rule 2. Cook and cool with the skin on wherever possible. The skin acts as a secondary barrier that helps maintain the moisture balance the starch needs to recrystallize properly. It also contributes a layer of insoluble fiber that works alongside the resistant starch to further slow digestion. Peeling before cooling is not catastrophic, but it is leaving benefit on the table unnecessarily. Rule 3. Reheat gently and stop before it is steaming. This is the piece almost nobody mentions, and the piece most people get wrong. You do not have to eat a cold potato to receive the benefit. Research has shown that previously cooled potato retains a meaningful portion of its resistant starch when reheated to a moderate temperature. What reverses the process is aggressive high heat sustained over time. Deep frying, prolonged high-temperature roasting, or extended microwaving at full power. A gentle reheat in a moderate oven under 350 degrees or a slow warm in a pan preserves the crystalline starch structure you spent 12 hours building. Get it warm. Stop before it is piping hot. Save this video. The next time you are meal prepping for the week and potatoes are on the list, you will want these 3 rules in front of you before you decide how to handle them. One more detail on the product itself. If you want the highest concentration of resistant starch from the cooling process, the variety of potato matters. Purple potatoes and new potatoes have a specific ratio of amylose to amylopectin, the 2 types of starch found in potatoes, that makes them significantly more efficient at retrogradation than large, starchy russets. If you have access to them, and the choice is available, they are worth choosing specifically for this purpose. Now here is what honest discussion of this topic requires saying plainly. Resistant starch is not a metabolic override. A large portion of potato prepared correctly will still raise blood sugar more than a small portion of non-starchy vegetables. The goal here is not to replace sound dietary judgment with a preparation trick. It is to give someone who is already eating thoughtfully an additional lever, one that costs nothing, requires no special equipment, and takes 5 minutes of active effort, that meaningfully changes how the body processes a food they may have been unnecessarily avoiding. For someone managing a diagnosed metabolic condition, this is a complement to medical guidance, not a replacement for it. The mechanism is real. The benefit is real. The limitations are also real. All 3 deserve to be said in the same breath. Now here is the part most nutritionists never reach, and it is the most significant piece of this entire conversation. When resistant starch arrives in your large intestine and is fermented by gut bacteria, one of the primary byproducts of that fermentation is a short-chain fatty acid called butyrate. Butyrate is the primary fuel source for the cells lining your colon. It supports gut barrier integrity. It reduces intestinal inflammation, but its effects extend beyond the gut itself. Research has documented what scientists call the second meal effect. When you consume resistant starch at one meal, the butyrate produced from its fermentation improves insulin sensitivity systemically, meaning your body's glucose response at your next meal is measurably better than it would have been without the resistant starch at the previous one. A portion of cooled and gently reheated potatoes at lunch can produce a meaningfully better blood sugar reading after dinner. Not because of what you ate at dinner, because of what the lunch was still doing in your large intestine 6 hours later. You are not just flattening the spike from one meal. You are feeding a gut ecosystem that improves your baseline metabolic function across the entire day. Well, that is a different conversation than the one that told you to simply eliminate the starch. You are not a restricted eater following a clinical routine. You are someone performing a controlled chemical reaction in your own kitchen, one that your body responds to with measurable biological precision. Most people your age were handed a list of what they cannot have and told that was the conversation. You now understand the chemistry underneath the list. That is not the same position. It leads somewhere different. Think about someone in your life who quietly stopped cooking the meals that meant something to them after a diagnosis, who made the trade and accepted the loss as the price of staying healthy. Send this to them, because knowing the mechanism returns something that did not need to be taken away. It just needed to be understood. But resistant starch addresses how your body processes the starch you eat. It does not address what is happening at the cellular level to your insulin receptors themselves. The gradual change in how aging muscle cells respond to insulin signaling that happens independently of what you eat or how you prepare it. That process has its own mechanism. It is driven by something that occurs inside the cell membrane during a specific window after meals. And understanding it changes the question from how do I manage the spike to why is the spike getting harder to manage in the first place. That is the next conversation. The kitchen is not a pharmacy, but the right chemistry makes it feel like one. Before you go, tell me in the comments, what is the one food you gave up entirely after your diagnosis that you now wonder whether you actually needed to eliminate? Write it out. Because other people watching this made the same decision, and your answer might give someone permission to ask the question they stopped asking years ago.